It's the one experience we will all face, yet it's the only thing we can never truly understand. Is death the end of everything, or is it the beginning of something else? Or is it simply nothing? No matter how much we think, theorize, or believe, we cannot know what lies beyond. Death is the ultimate unknown, and this uncertainty shapes every aspect of our lives. But what happens when we embrace this uncertainty, when we confront the fact that we may never know? The fear of death is, in many ways, a fear of the unknown. It's not just that we cease to exist, it's that we don't know what that means. What happens when our consciousness stops? Is there something more, or do we simply fade into nothingness? Philosophers have long grappled with this fear. Socrates famously said that death is either a dreamless sleep or a journey to another world. Either way, it's nothing to be feared. But for many, the unknown is terrifying, and we build our lives trying to escape it. This uncertainty about death drives many of our actions. Our need for control, our search for meaning, our attempts to leave something behind. But what if the only answer to death is that there is no answer at all? What if the ultimate unknown is simply unknowable? Science has given us incredible insights into the physical world, including death. We know how the body shuts down, how cells degrade, how the brain ceases to function. Medically, we understand the mechanics of dying, but science only gives us the physical answer. It tells us what happens when our bodies stop working, but not what happens to us, to our consciousness, our awareness, or our experience. Science can explain the biological process, but it doesn't touch the deeper, more existential question. What does it mean to die? Even with all our advancements, we are no closer to answering this. Neuroscientists may study the brain, but they can't explain consciousness itself, let alone what happens to it after death. Some argue that consciousness is purely a byproduct of brain activity, and when the brain dies, consciousness ends. Others suggest that there may be more, something we can't yet measure or understand. This is where science reaches its limit. It can tell us what death looks like from the outside, but it can't tell us what it feels like from the inside. It can explain how we die, but not what death is. In the end, we are left with the same uncertainty, the same ultimate unknown. For millennia, humans have turned to religion to escape the fear of death. Religions across the world offer comforting answers to the mysteries of mortality. Christianity promises eternal life. Islam speaks of paradise, and Hinduism and Buddhism offer reincarnation and eventual liberation from the cycle of rebirth. These beliefs offer solace in the face of death's uncertainty. But is religion truly an escape? Is it a way to avoid the harsh reality of death? Nietzsche argued that belief in the afterlife was a form of denial, a way to avoid confronting the fact that death is final. In his famous declaration, "God is dead," Nietzsche wasn't just talking about the decline of religion, he was talking about the collapse of meaning itself. Without the promise of an afterlife, we are forced to face the reality that life may be all there is. Yet, for billions of people, religion provides a framework to make sense of death. Rituals like funerals, prayers, and mourning rites help societies process death and maintain a connection to those who have passed. These beliefs ease the fear of the unknown by offering an answer, whether it's true or not. But the question remains, is religion a way to truly confront death, or is it a comforting illusion? Do these beliefs help us understand death, or do they distract us from the finality of it? Friedrich Nietzsche looked death straight in the eye, and what he saw was the collapse of meaning itself. For Nietzsche, death is not just the end of life, it's the final blow to everything we hold dear. When we die, everything we've built, achieved, and believed in is wiped away. When Nietzsche declared that God is dead, he wasn't simply talking about the decline of religion. He was talking about the collapse of all higher meaning. For centuries, belief in God and an afterlife provided humanity with a framework for understanding existence. Life's suffering, its injustices, and even death itself were justified by the promise of redemption in the next world. The idea that there is a divine plan gave life meaning, even in the face of death. But with God dead, Nietzsche asked, what's left? Without the belief in a higher power, without an afterlife to give our struggles meaning, we are forced to confront a stark reality. Death erases everything. There is no divine justice, no cosmic reward waiting for us. Death simply ends us, and all that we are vanishes. For Nietzsche, this realization leads to the heart of nihilism, the belief that life has no inherent meaning or value. If there is no higher purpose, no divine plan, and no afterlife, then what's the point? Why do we live, strive, and suffer if it all leads to nothing? In a world without God, Nietzsche argued, the traditional sources of meaning, religion, morality, and the belief in progress begin to crumble. And death becomes the ultimate symbol of this collapse. It's the event that strips away everything, leaving nothing behind. If we all die and nothing of us remains, then what value do our lives have? But Nietzsche didn't see nihilism as the end of the story. He saw it as an abyss, a void that we must confront. Death, for Nietzsche, symbolizes that void. It's the moment where everything we hold on to, our beliefs, our values, our identity, falls away, revealing the emptiness beneath. The question Nietzsche posed was this: how do we live knowing that death will erase everything? How do we continue to create, to love, and to struggle when death nullifies it all? For Nietzsche, the death of God and the reality of death confront us with the absurdity of existence. We spend our lives building meaning, striving for purpose, only to be met with the finality of death, an event that wipes everything clean, leaving no trace of what we've done. This is the essence of nihilism, the recognition that the universe is indifferent to us, that death is inevitable, and that nothing we do will ultimately last. But Nietzsche's genius was in recognizing that we cannot escape this realization. We must face it. We must stand on the edge of the abyss and look into it, knowing that it looks back into us. Nietzsche believed that most of humanity, when confronted with the reality of death, seeks false comforts. Religion, for example, offers an escape from the fear of death by promising an afterlife. But Nietzsche saw this as a form of denial, an attempt to avoid the harsh truth of mortality. In his eyes, belief in God, in heaven, or in any form of eternal life was simply a way to distract ourselves from the fact that life is finite and that death is absolute. He argued that such beliefs weaken us because they prevent us from confronting the truth. To Nietzsche, true courage lies in rejecting these comforting illusions and accepting the cold reality of death. Life, he argued, has no divine purpose, no preordained plan, and no guarantee of meaning beyond what we create for ourselves. Death is not a gateway to another life. It is the end. In this sense, Nietzsche challenges us to live without illusion, to embrace the truth of death, and to find strength in the face of its finality. For Nietzsche, the awareness of death, the knowledge that it will come for each of us without exception, should not lead to despair, but to a new kind of freedom. When we accept that death ends us, that there is no afterlife and no higher meaning, we are left with the opportunity to live more fully. Rather than seeking comfort in false beliefs or distracting ourselves from death's inevitability, Nietzsche urged us to confront it directly. He believed that life's value comes not from some external source, but from how we face its impermanence. Death strips away everything, but in that stripping away, it forces us to find meaning within ourselves. In the end, Nietzsche's view of death is not hopeful, but it is honest. Death is the great equalizer, the final event that reduces all our achievements and beliefs to dust. But it is also the force that pushes us to live, to create, and to find meaning even in the absence of any greater purpose. So, what does death ultimately teach us? After all these reflections, we are left with one undeniable truth. Death remains the ultimate unknown. Science gives us a physical understanding. Religion offers comforting answers, and Nietzsche challenges us to confront its meaninglessness, but none of them provide certainty. Perhaps that's the point. There is no final answer to death. Whether we turn to philosophy, religion, or science, death leaves us with more questions than answers. And maybe that's the true power of death. It forces us to think, to question, and to live more fully in the time we have. In the end, death doesn't give us meaning. It challenges us to create our own. And while it erases everything we build, it also pushes us to live in the face of that erasure, to find strength in life's impermanence, and to face the void without fear. Death is not an answer. It's the question that shapes everything we do.